Okay. So hello and good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Tamara Sharon Ross. I see a lot of friendly faces here. I'm the co-executive director of the Heschel Center for Sustainability. I was going to say that I'm excited to share our stories with you today, but excited is not really the right word. Since October 7th, our lives have not been the same. We've gone through a horrific trauma and trauma that we probably won't begin to recover from when there's still war going on, suffering, and hostages in Gaza. And yet, the story of recovery, hope, and rehabilitation must be told. So we'll immediately get to it. But first, it's important to provide some context. The Heschel Center was established over 25 years ago to introduce a new paradigm that changes how people perceive the environmental change in Israel. Instead of focusing on the environment, we place the focus on ourselves as humanity, as a society. The planet will continue going on around the sun, with or without us. But if we don't change the way we treat the environment, the way we treat each other, and even ourselves, we won't be here. This is the concept of sustainability, which we call at the Heschel Center the third paradigm. The Heschel Center is the leading think and do tank that hosts sustainability transformative learning programs for decision makers and leaders in Israel, such as the Heschel Fellows Program and the Develop Program. Our alumni network is exclusive but very diverse. The network of alumni informs and supports the ideas and tools of the Heschel Center inside and outside and assists us in widening our impact. We're also introducing innovative democracy into Israeli frameworks, consulting local authorities on climate mitigation and adaptation, and conducting research on policy and renewable energy with Project ENZO, which you will hear about. We're also introducing today the idea of renewable energy in the context of recovery and rebuilding, and this is why we're all here. So thank you for joining us. We're here from our panelists, and if you have questions, please write them down in the chat. We'll get to it in the end. Happy to begin. So let's start with introducing our panelists today. First, we'll hear from Yara Ben-Nachum. She is our renewable energy field expert. She's an organizational psychologist by training with expertise on innovation and creativity processes. She's a Heschel Fellow alumna. In the last 5 years, she's been working with local authorities to promote solar energy generation, and through that, to identify the barriers that prevent the transition to renewable energy, and ultimately to design the appropriate policy. Hila is our second presenter. She is a renewable energy research coordinator at the Heschel Center. She recently returned to Israel from Northern California, where she studied environmental economics at Berkeley. Hila joined the ENZO team to research demand flexibility, which you will hear about as well. Our third panelist is Ram Amal. Ram Amal is the CEO of Rewind.Earth, a marine biomass carbon removal startup, pioneering a scalable, permanent, nature-based MCDR approach. With background in physics and computer science, Ram is previously built and sold Aluma, a big data startup to Google, and then turned to work on mitigating the climate crisis. Alongside Rewind, he is also working on a community of entrepreneurs transitioning to climate tech, and he's also a philanthropist to various climate causes. He's also a Heschel Fellow alumnus and one of the founders of Project ENZO. So I want to start with you. The first question, as one of the founders of ENZO, what were the goals of the ENZO project, and what did you wish to achieve in the first couple of years?
Tamara, thanks for the introduction. And this question brings me back to around 2019, I think, when climate change kind of made a comeback to public awareness. But for the Heschel Center, it was like, where has everyone been this past 20 years? Because sustainability and climate change was number one on Heschel's agenda all this time. But seeing kind of the world and the Paris Agreement, moving countries to make declarations to transition to renewable energy, while Israel had like a meager 17% renewable energy goal by God knows when. It was kind of like a shocking kind of realization that Israel is doing nothing. and no one is talking about it, and something should be done. And being inspired by how influence on government works in kind of the business sector, the idea was, let's build a knowledge base around renewable energy, explaining why it makes sense for a sunny, very sunny country like Israel to produce most of its energy from the sun, and dropping coal, dropping gas, and going all the way renewable. And we wanted to do it in a very convincing way. So we brought along a big group of volunteers, many of them engineers from electricity, from power generation, from computer science, and environment, solar entrepreneurship. And this very diverse group put together a model of kind of describing what Israel's energy demand is and how it's going to grow over the next 30 years. And then on the other hand, how much solar energy would we need to produce? And what most people would say is that it's too expensive and there's not enough land. So those were the two main questions that the ENZO model focused on. How much land would be required and how much it's going to cost. And we demonstrated that there's definitely enough land in Israel. And we even put together kind of a layout and a suggestion how most of the solar power can be produced in residential areas and agricultural land that is closer to the center, saving all kinds of expensive and ugly transmission lines. And we took those kind of demands for how much energy would need to be produced and where it would be deployed, and then asked how much is this going to cost? What are the cost forecasts? It was pretty much at the, right after the 10 years where solar power very quickly became the cheapest form of energy production. And again, using very complicated spreadsheets and some programming, we showed that transitioning to 95% renewable energy with mostly solar and storage, kind of regular lithium ion storage, would cost the same as doing nothing and continuing the Israel's kind of business as usual plan of producing energy with natural gas. And to make that kind of very convincing, we hired Deloitte to review all of our numbers and all of our spreadsheets and put their stamp on it. And then we wrote a 90-page document and wrapped it with a website and did a lot of advocacy around it, from webinars to meetings. We called it a roadshow with the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Agriculture and kind of the Land Management Authority here in Israel, trying to talk to everyone, kind of show them what's happening in the world. Solar is the cheapest form of energy. All of the countries are putting much more aggressive renewable energy production goals, and Israel can do it too. It can do it at a cost-efficient way. So go do it. That was the main message. And the first, I'd say 1.5, 2 years of the ENZO project. And since then, it has grown and become something even more amazing.
That's right. Thank you for this. So my next question is for Yara. So now, a few years later, what is ENZO's mode of operation now?
So we had a great model to begin with, and that made a lot of impact, as Ram said. But as we all know, good models and good theories are great, but are not enough. That's why we at the Heschel Center always make sure we work with the field and get our hands dirty. And we actually worked with local municipalities all across Israel to check if it is possible to promote renewable energies and what are the obstacles. Not surprisingly, we found a lot of obstacles that couldn't be seen when you look from your comfort research table. But we brought them up, we formed solutions to them, and then we suggested new models and new regulations to the regulatory bodies, to the Ministry of Energy, to the Electricity Authority, and that way we could actually make a real change down in the field.
Yeah, and then if we can continue on that note, basically in the last year and a half, Israel has faced not just regular challenges of reducing emissions and climate adaptation, but we had kind of an ongoing emergency to rebuild, to rethink our planning. So what is the role of renewable energies in this kind of recovery process?
Yeah, as you said, October 7 was a great shock also for the concepts that led Israel's security till that time. And on October 7, many communities were left in darkness, practically. And we saw that electricity as a basic life necessity must be provided to each and every house. We understood that the old grid that was centralized, had very few power plants, is good, but it is not enough. And then came the opportunity to have decentralized microgrids or local islands. It's a form that Israel was not, we were not able to form this in Israel before, and that's why we brought up this idea to the Ministry of Energy. What you can see here in the picture is a tour we did to the Ministry of Energy and the Electricity Authority a year ago on March 24 to study this issue. And many issues came and we had a lot of talk with them during this tour, but one of them was that even households that have solar panels on the rooftops could not consume their own electricity locally. Just because some weird regulations. And guess what? Just 2 weeks later, after this tour, the Ministry of Energy and the Electricity Authority suggested new regulation that actually enables households to consume their own electricity. And they published that. That was one of our major impacts, very short, that usually you could not see that in such a short time.
This brings us to your work in the Western Negev. Yara, can you please share us a little bit about your work and how it began and how's it going now?
So our work at the Western Negev started back in 2021. We did a climate adaptation and mitigation plan with the regional cluster. They have a Western Negev regional cluster, and directly with the municipalities in that area, 5 municipalities that are really next to the Gaza border. And we formed this long-term plan. Later on, we moved to implementation with them. We started to make small initiatives to fulfill the goals of the mitigation plan. We discovered many barriers in that process, as we always do when we get to the field. We suggested some solutions. Some of them were implemented, some are yet to be implemented. However, we got to have really good relationship with many people in that area and really form partnership with them.
And October 7th came, and then what happened?
So October 7 came and, well, first took away a few of our colleagues and good friends in that area. It was a great shock to everyone. However, we had the knowledge and we had the, we were in contact with the people there. And that's why I personally was asked by the Ministry of Energy and by the regional cluster to aid them, to help them to form to map the needs and to form the regulations and the plans to rehabilitate the area. We actually succeeded in doing so, and much of the Tkuma decision, the governmental decision, it had many aspects that were important to us. It was based on renewable energy. It had no gas or fossil fuels in it, although there were forces that really wanted to have it in. And we are still working on it today.
Mm-hmm. In the process, you also, you were in these planning committees. Some of them were consultants that didn't have a certain agenda. So, one of the stories Yara told me is that, we influenced these consulting groups or consulting companies that were in the room with us, and they ended up using a lot of the messages that we were conveying in the planning committees. So that was a really important work. So did you get to work with any specific community?
We got to work with few communities, and I think the one that touched our heart the most is the community of Kibbutz Nir Oz. Kibbutz Nir Oz was one of the most badly hit communities on October 7th. Quarter of its members were murdered or kidnapped, and few of the members are still in the tunnels today, and we really wish them to be back home soon. As you can see, some of the kibbutz, the trees are still standing, but the houses were burnt, and the kibbutz practically had to be rebuilt from scratch. They formed a group of consultants to aid them with this huge task. It was never done before in Israel. I was privileged to ask in, and we worked with them on the sustainability issues and on energy resilience, and really helped them to think on new ways of building a place that is good for the community, both to rehabilitate the physical aspects and the mental aspects in the 21st century. The kibbutz was built back in the 50s, and many things had to be rebuilt today, and we have a chance to build it back better. If you go to the next slide, it was a very emotional occasion when we actually presented the plans to the community and to the architects, and suggested new ways of regeneration and sustainable ways to build the place back.
So what is from all the things that you learned from the field, we said in the beginning, we learn from the field and we take it to the policy. Can we use what you learned from your experience in the Negev to the rest of the country?
Well, sadly enough, the Western Negev is not the only place that got hit on October 7th, and the northern border of Israel was hit as well. And now we're working with the northern part on similar issues, and we have a lot of lessons that we are implementing now up north. This picture I took yesterday in Shlomi. It's a town really next to the Lebanese border. The mountain you see behind is Lebanon. It's much closer in reality than it seems in the picture. Mm-hmm. And there are many lessons that we implement there. However, it is not only for the periphery of Israel. There are many things that are good and that should be implemented in other places. For example, decentralized grids or issues like demand management that Hila is investigating.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That moves us to really talk about demand management that you mentioned. It's relevant not just in recovery, but also in regular times. But now in the context of recovery, Hila, you researched and wrote a policy paper on demand flexibility. What is the role of demand side flexibility? How is it shaping the energy transition? What's especially relevant now?
Thank you, Tamara and Yara. So, like Yara said, in the aftermath of October 7, we really began working with the community of Nir Oz to help rebuild their energy system, and not just to restore power, but to create real energy security. And what we saw there is true across the country. And demand response, the idea is that Israel can't keep chasing growing electricity demand by building more and more polluting power plants. That's a race we will never win. Instead, we need to flip the equation. So alongside building renewables, we must also manage the demand, specifically shifting electricity use away from peak evening hours into more sunny midday hour, where clean solar power is abundant. It's not about asking people to use less electricity, but to use it smarter without compromising comfort or the quality of life. In this way, we increase the percentage of utilization of renewable energy without adding or building new infrastructure. But for me, and regarding the post-war, this work about demand response is not just about efficiency, it's about resilience. In a country like Israel, where energy infrastructure become national vulnerability in times of conflict, demand flexibility is actually a form of defense. It gives us options. Imagine this, Tamara. Instead of shutting off power during emergency, we can send real-time signals to households, asking them to reduce non-essential use for a few hours. And then we can manage the grid better. But this thing takes trust. It takes smart digital infrastructure. It takes deep public engagement. And that's exactly what we're trying to build with Demand Response. What gives me hope is that we don't have to start from scratch, but we're learning from places like California and the UK, and we translate those lessons into policy that fits Israel context. After the war, as we rebuild the system, we have a rare chance to do things different, not just to recover, but to recover smarter. We want to make sure that our energy future is not just clean, but more affordable and more secure.
Okay, and from what you learned and studied from other countries, are there any tools or steps that we can take right away that we can adopt easily?
Very, very easily. And that's a very important question, because the first step, it might surprise you, it's not actually technical, but it's more cultural. So we see the app with the notification for consumers. Today, electricity consumers in Israel, they have no visibility into when the energy is clean or polluting, expensive or cheap. So they have a flat price and no signals from the market. The system doesn't signal them when the grid is under stress, or when solar power is abundant, and we should prioritize it and use more electricity. So the first innovation we need is actually not a new device, but it's consumers' awareness. In the research of Demand Response, we show that consumers' education is fundamental. Demand response programs start by giving people simple signals, notifications, or price incentives that alert them when the grid is strained. Usually it's during peak evening hours, and it offers them a reward for voluntarily, at the beginning, reducing their usage. It keeps the control in the hand of consumers while aligning their behavior with the system needs. Advanced technologies like we already have in Israel, like smart meters and user-friendly apps, help people understand their personal consumption patterns and the environmental impact of their choices. It builds energy literacy that we don't have yet, and trust. Those are essential for a long-term transition. Once we have this consumers' awareness of their huge impact on the grid, we can introduce more sophisticated tools, for example, the smart thermostat, and we can remote control lower by 1 or 2 degrees the AC for a short time during peak demand without affecting comfort. It's significantly easing the pressure on the grid. We saw that in the US and in the UK. It's automated, remote management. It scale up quickly and make real differences, especially when paired with solar production during the day. Generally speaking, our work at Enzo, we also emphasize that innovation, it's not just about technology. We emphasize policy design and user experience. So we look at what's working in California and the UK and other markets, and we adapt those models to fit Israeli households, infrastructure, and of course, values. Ultimately, the goal is to move consumers from being passive, one-directional energy model to a more dynamic, participatory system that increase utilization of renewable energy and make people not just consumers, but active players in the Israeli energy market.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to getting that app on my phone, like tomorrow. Thank you so much. So, Hila, you bring us to the issue of innovation, and I'd like to refer the last questions to Ram. So, speaking of the opportunities of the climate tech, overcoming this and climate transition in these difficult times, what is the role of innovation and philanthropy, which is basically your other hat, in these times of crisis?
It's answer could be very long. We could just talk like an hour both about climate philanthropy in Israel and about climate innovation. I'll start with climate philanthropy. Kind of for me, post Enzo, kind of the first 2 years, the evolution of thinking about pushing climate action forward in Israel progressed into kind of understanding that there are many players, many NGOs, many different groups who are trying to advocate for different topics in climate, sometimes more coordinated, sometimes less. Definitely for anyone who wants to contribute, it's a very confusing space. I mean, solving climate change is a very complicated question. Now, what do you have to do? What's more important? What's the most important thing to contribute towards? So if you're a philanthropist coming in to kind of do and help kind of climate action in Israel, you need kind of some PhD next to you telling you, well, this should be first, this should be second, that should be third, and then they should work together. And no one was doing that. So this is how a small new fund called PI, in Hebrew it's פעולה אקלימית לישראל, in English Pro Climate Action Israel. And the idea was to bring a group of philanthropists, pool funds together, and hire that expert who knows everybody and understands climate and understands government and can kind of pull everyone together and deploy funds in the most efficient way. This is kind of where I personally kind of moved my climate action contributions. And of course, Pi and Enzo, it's like a match made in heaven, because energy is the biggest part of emissions in Israel. And there's so much to do, both in continuing to understand policy where it needs to be and influencing government so it goes in that direction, and then taking the policy and making sure it's implemented, whether with local communities and whether it's with the industry, the renewable energy companies, the electricity grid, the electricity management. Everything that Enzo is doing can be amplified and can grow into more areas of how Israel uses its energy. And then to the second half of your question, innovation is core to Israeli culture. I kind of grew up in this kind of space of software engineering and startups, and all my friends started companies, and the Startup Nation Central and books have been written about it. But most of the efforts are going to cybersecurity, to AI, to things that are very virtual, and there are these huge real physical problems that need to be solved. So one thing is to get those entrepreneurs that are really very skilled and very talented and very ambitious, and show them the real interesting problems and where the new financial profits can come from. But then there's also a role of between kind of philanthropy and energy think tanks and innovation, and this is something that Enzo has done once or twice or more, and it's kind of realized where a small contribution to kind of technology implementation. For example, the agro photovoltaic, combining PV over agricultural fields. So this was kind of a core topic at Enzo, and getting a farmer and a solar expert to kind of work together and put together a proposal for the Ministry of Energy to get funding for what they call kind of pioneering projects. This was something that Enzo has done and can be done much more, to bring in new technologies, to show that they work, to demonstrate that amazing things can happen when you put small amounts of money in the right places and things just take off.
That's great. I think you failed to mention in the beginning that you came up with the idea, or the idea for Enzo, you know, net zero emissions, or Enzo Agada, like Herzl was saying, is not a legend. So I think it's important to say that in this context. So Ami, thank you so much for the panelists. I just want to say a few closing remarks, and then we'll open up for questions. I think what I take from this interesting conversation is that kind of the reason why the Heschel Center chose to focus on renewable energy, and even on climate action in general, because we can do climate action that is not sustainable. We can do renewable energies that are not sustainable. You know, we can cover the entire deserts with solar panels. But we owe it to the next generations to protect our solar systems. And that's why the Enzo plan relies on principles that would preserve nature, empower local communities, and be reliable during these times of crisis. So I really thank you and appreciate this interesting conversation. And before, I'd like to thank also the Enzo team, our dedicated group of volunteers, especially Alon Segal, our volunteer director of Enzo. We're also grateful to our dedicated funders who still believe together with us that it is no legend, especially Yoki Gil, Ram, and the Pi Fund. So thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions, this is the time.